Hello everyone, and welcome to an opening video on the Rousseau Gambit. This is an extremely strong opening weapon for black against the Italian game. It is very trappy, the win rate for black is very high as well. And I just want to say before we start, this is an objectively losing opening. And that's really, to me at least, just part of playing a gambit. There's really no way of getting around it, because that's the price you have to pay for nice, aggressive, and fun positions. So it comes after the Italian game, which is pawn to e4 by white, and we will play pawn to e5. They will play knight to f3, attacking our e-pawn. We will play knight to c6, just defending it. And now they play the move bishop to c4, the Italian game. Now we get a chance to play the gambit with the move pawn to f4. The intention of this move is to get rid of their only pawn in the center, whether that is by force of us taking them or them taking us. And white really only has three moves that are any good in this position. The first one is to take our pawn, and that's the most common move. However, it is actually a little bit of a mistake, at least according to the engine. The second move they can play here is pawn to d3, just defending their e-pawn from another pawn and being very solid. And the last move that they can play here is pawn to d4. If your opponent does play this against you, be expecting a little bit more of a difficult game than all the other variations. So I'll start off with their most common move, which is to take our pawn. And this is actually kind of a mistake for white. The reason is that now we just shove our e-pawn in the center, and this knight doesn't really have a nice square to go home to. If it goes to knight to g5 or h4, then we can just take it with our queen. If they play to the center, to either of these squares, then we can just take it with our knight. And if they move it back to g1, which is their only move that they can actually play here, well, that's just really sad. They just developed this knight, now they have to go right back. That's just kind of depressing. But depressing or not, they have to play knight back to g1, at which point we'll simply play pawn to d5, just, pushing our another pawn to the center and attacking their bishop, whilst also defending our e-pawn in the center. And if they move their bishop back, then we'll simply take their pawn and everything's fine here. However, the much more challenging approach for them is to instead play the move queen to h5 check. Now we do have to be a little careful here, since if we play a move like pawn to g6, then we are actually now completely losing, because after they take it, they have this really strong move here that they're going to play, pawn to g7, discover check against their king, and they're going to take a rook and promote into another queen. And needless to say, this is completely losing. We cannot play this. Instead, we're going to play a move that might look a little surprising to the uninitiated, king to e7. Now, this king to e7 move, at first glance, yeah, it looks very bad. Why would we put our king here, blocks our bishop, yada yada yada. However, I can reassure you that this is very good for us. At least according to the engine, we are better here, but also the win rate here. Black wins 56% of the games here, compared to white's 40%, because despite our king being on this awkward square, white does not have a way to actually punish that. So white's bishop is still under attack. They have to move it somewhere. Most likely they'll move it back to b3, at which point we'll simply play knight to f6, just, developing our knight and attacking their queen. And we have two main ideas in this position. The first one we will play is if they try to keep hanging their queen around her pawn with something like queen to g5, and if we try to kick it away, then they just scoot it all the way in and try to keep this pawn defended. If they play this, then we will play the move knight to d4, attacking this pawn with now our knight and our bishop, and we are simply going to win it back. And also, now that we've moved our knight away, we can, in the future, maybe take this bishop, or much more likely to play the move pawn to c3 and get just a very nice pawn chain here in the center. And the other main idea here we will play in pretty much every variation. For our sake, so I'll show the move queen to h4, which is the engine's best move. If they play this, then we will take their pawn on f5, and after they develop, now I play the key idea here, king to f7. This might look, once again, to the uninitiated, really weird. Why are we moving our king again? However, we have to, because when our king is stuck here on e7, it blocks out our bishop, meaning we can't develop it, and therefore we can't get a rook out either, and plus our king is still on this really awkward square. However, when we go to f7 here, This king is actually surprisingly safe on the square, and now we can move our bishop out, we can move our rook out as well, and if we really want to, we can even scoot our king all the way back, and self-castle if we really want to be safe. So that is all you really need to know if they end up taking our f-pawn. There is one little loose end in here that I normally wouldn't tell you, but if I didn't tell you, then I wouldn't be able to live with myself. After they take our pawn and we push to e4, is one other move that they can move their knight other than g1, and that is to d4. At first glance, this might look completely insane. It's not just a free knight. However, if we take it, then we are now completely losing because they would have queen to h5 check, and our king has to run, and then we would end up losing our knight. Yeah, because we have to move again, and then they would just take this, and we would be losing here. So instead, we will simply play the move knight to f6, and this is just very normal. We are still better here because we will play pawn to d4, we will end up taking this pawn, yada yada. This is very good for us. Alright, so that is now officially all you need to know if they end up taking our f-pawn here. However, now we'll look at the second most common move that they can play here, pawn to d3, solidifying their e-pawn in the center. If they play this, then we'll simply play bishop to c5. That way we can play pawn to d6 without blocking in our bishop, because otherwise, bishop would be stuck on these two squares, which would just be very sad. They'll most likely castle here, or play some other very normal move, like, knight to c3. However, there is one little thing here. If they play the move knight to g5, try and get into f7 with their knight and their bishop, we can actually completely ignore this threat with the move pawn to f4. Yeah, absolutely insane looking, but the point is that after they play knight to f7, completely forking us, then now you have the move queen to h4. Yeah, this is completely insane. We threaten mate with our bishop and our queen, while our rook is still completely hanging in the corner here. I have a whole video on this Dubois variation, that's the name of this, if you want to take a further look at it. But no matter how crazy this looks, keep in mind that everything I share with you, including this insane variation looking here, is relatively good according to the engine. So instead of playing knight to g5, they'll most likely simply castle here, at which point we will develop our knight to f6, and after they play knight to c3, now once again we play this move pawn to f4, and the reason it's so nice here is that this bishop is now going to lead a very sad life, because it can't move here, because our pawn controls it, meaning the only square it has is this d2 square, and if a bishop only has this d2 square, or d7 square, chances are that bishop isn't going to do much for a very long time. So they have to develop their bishop to d2, at which point we'll play pawn to d6, getting this golden pawn chain here. Now they'll most likely play the move pawn to h3 here. This is the best according to engine, because they really just don't have much else that they can do. At which point we will plop our knight into the center. They'll most likely trade. We take back for our bishop. And after they play the move pawn to a4, now we simply play pawn to c6, just getting our bishop a getaway route if we ever need it. And this is a very even position. If anything, this is better for us. That is all I really need to know if they play the move pawn to d3. However, there is one more move here that chances are if you face, you're going to get or you have a very good opponent that you're playing, which is the move pawn to d4. The reason this is the best move for white is that they're trying to exploit this diagonal here as fast as possible, and the fastest way to do that is to force some trades in the center. Now, if they do this, the best move here, technically according to the engine, is to take here like this. But the problem is, after they take here on e5, like here, I looked at this and I found that, this just isn't very good for black here. It seems all the variations lead to very annoying positions where you have to find only one or two moves that don't lose. Instead, the move that I prefer here is to simply take their d-pawn. Now, their best two moves in this position that you will likely only face are either taking this d-pawn back or going to g5 and trying to get this fork. If they take on a d4, the most common move that they can do, then this usually will fall into a very even endgame. We will trade knights, then we will trade our pawns, and we simply block for our queen. They'll most likely take it, and we simply take back of our bishop, and this might be a slightly subpar for us. However, this is a very even position, and the disadvantage that we have here is insanely hard for white to actually get, or actually to capitalize on in any way, and chances are this is just an even position. The other thing that they can play here, knight to g5. If they play this, then we'll simply play knight to e5, attacking their bishop and defending this f7 square. If they take our pawn on d4, then we will simply take their bishop, and after they take back, we will play queen to e7, both pinning this pawn to their king and defending this fret here with their queen and knight. And we have a very simple plan here. We're first of all, obviously going to develop, and we are also trying to get the move c free and d5 in, so we can get, just a very nice center, and that would just be very good for us. The best move for them is to take her pawn on f5, and this doesn't just hang their bishop, because if we take their bishop, then their queen comes in, and now this is actually just losing for us. So instead, we're going to play the move knight to f6, just keeping this queen from, ever coming in here. And now we just have a very even position. These same ideas apply, c free and d5 here, maybe taking this pawn. This is just a very good position for us. Alright, thank you so much for watching. Let me know how this opening goes in the comments. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff, and I will see you next time.